Okay, hello and welcome to lesson 8 on topic 24, sine and cosine rule. So last lesson we looked at all four of these things combined and trying to work out which rule to use and what scenario to use it in. Now, something fairly similar today, but this is more difficult. So we're going to be looking at combining one or more of these rules. Okay, sometimes in questions you'll need to use 2 rules, sometimes you'll need to use 3 rules. Okay, so it's about making sure we can identify again when to use which rule and then how to work through a problem and solve it. So the title today is going to be questions involving more than one formula, okay, more than one rule. And these questions typically come up towards the end of one of the calculator papers, either paper 2 or paper 3, quite regularly worth 4, 5, sometimes 6 marks. So what we're looking at initially is something like this. So I'd like you to copy this question down. And this is fairly typical of the sort of thing you'll get. So initially, it's just about evaluating the question and thinking, what do I have? What do I need to find? What do I know? What can I use? Okay. So if we look here, work out the length of AD. That's ultimately what I'm trying to do, is I'm trying to work out this. Now, in order to get there, clearly I can't just get there straight away, because when I look at this triangle, I've only got one side and one angle labelled to me already. And I can't get either of these 2 angles, I can't get this side straight away. So we can't do anything with this triangle initially, but we've got to look at this triangle and think, well, what can I do? So when I look at this triangle, I've got 2 angles, I've got a side here, and then that leads me to think that I can find a second side, because 2 sides, 2 angles would be the sine rule. So if I look at this, this is opposite here, and then this is opposite here. So straight away, I'm thinking, well, one thing I could do is to use the sine rule to be able to find that side. And the reason that's important is because then if I know that side, I'm now looking at this triangle here, and thinking, well, if I know what this is, I'm then going to have this side, the angle I want this side. So that's 3 sides and 1 angle, which is the cosine rule. So straight away, I can kind of connect those ideas together and understand that if I do the sine rule first and then the cosine rule, I should be able to solve the problem, okay? Now that's quite a lot to get your head around, so please kind of pause and rewind and just review what it is that I've said. But I'll talk you through the actual maths of it now. So initially, we're looking to try and use the cosine rule to find y. The sine rule to try and find y. Now when we look at this, we're looking to find a side, which means the side should be on the top of the formula. So I'm looking at a over sine A equals b over sine b. Now substitute in what you've got there and what you're looking to find. So 12.5, and you would label the triangle and go through that process. I'm not going to label it now, but you would go through, ignore these letters, and you would go A, B, C like we have done in previous videos. So 12.5 over sine 109. And that's equal to y over sine 34. Now, when we did this particular formula in lesson 3, what we then did was to multiply up the sine 34 and type that into your calculator. So if you've forgotten to do that, you need to review your work, or you need to go back to lesson 3, the video on that. So we multiply that up there, type that into our calculator, and you get y equals 7.39. Now, I'd be keeping that number in my calculator, okay? I don't want to just stop that after 2 decimal places. I want to keep that in my calculator to make sure I don't make any rounding errors at the end. So what I've done now is I've worked out what that is. So that's 7.39 centimetres there. So from here, I'm now looking at 3 sides, 1 angle. So I'm thinking cosine rule. I need to find a side, so I'm thinking the normal cosine rule. So I'm looking at a squared equals b squared plus c squared minus 2bc equals a. Now again, I would go through the process of labelling my sides. Okay, ignore the letters that are there, a, b, c, go through that process. What I've got here is x squared equals, and then if I call that b and that c, I'm going to go 7.39 squared. Now, one thing I would say at this point is I wouldn't be typing that into my calculator, I'd be using the answer button. So actually when I type that into my calculator, I'd be doing that. Okay, now for the purposes of your working, that's fine. But when you're actually typing it into your calculator, use the answer button to keep it exact. Plus 11.4 squared minus 2 times 7.39. again, use the answer button, times 11.4 times cos of 86. Now type all that into your calculator, you get an answer of 172.85, which looks quite big, but then you remember, actually I haven't finished this question, I need to square root. Okay, go back to lesson 1 if you've forgotten how to do the cosine rule. To square root that will get me 13.1 to 3 significant figures. So 13.1 centimetres to 3 significant figures, okay? Now, as I said, this whole process is quite difficult. You know, grade 7, grade 8, somewhere around there. This particular question was 4 marks, I believe. The next one we're going to look at was 5, maybe 6 marks. So I would like you to copy that down into your books. So pause this video at some point and make sure you've copied down not just the working, but what the thought process is. Okay, so sine rule initially, why have you done that? And then cosine rule, why have you done that? Okay, so 2 sides, 2 angles, 3 sides, 1 angle, that sort of thing. Now, as I said, this second question, again, fairly typical, 5 or 6 marks, I can't quite remember, but it was almost the last question on the paper. Okay, very involved question. There's a lot going on in this particular question. And so initially, we're given the area, okay? That's what we're given there. Ultimately, we want to work out the length of AB. And again, I'm thinking straight away, I'm not going to be able to get to that point straight away. I've got an angle opposite, I've got an angle there, I've got no other sides at all, so I can't use sine rule or cosine rule at this stage. What I have been given, however, is the area. And so I know that whenever I'm given the area, I can work backwards to try and find something, hopefully. And when you look at this initial triangle here, the ADC, this triangle here, I'm told the area of this, and if I think about how I'm going to set this up, what I would use is I would use a half AB sine C, and when I set that up, let's say I've got A and B here, because C has to be here because that's the angle, or I can find B here because I'm given the area and I can use that formula. So that's my first starting point, and I'm then going to go from there and show you how that progresses. But initially, what I'm looking to do is to use the area rule and work backwards, okay? So we're looking at lesson 6 here, if you've forgotten how to do that. I'd set this up as 56 equals a half times 11 times by, let's call that, let's say B there, times B times sine 105. So that's what I'm looking at initially, because I've been given the area. I then need to divide by those things, so 56 divided by 0.5 times 11 times sine 105, and that will get me what B is, and in this particular case that's 10.5. Okay, and again I'd be keeping that answer in my calculator because I need to make sure that I keep my answer as exact as possible until the end when I go around into 1 decimal place. Okay, so what I've worked out here is that is 10.5 centimetres. Now, what has that done for me? Well, initially it doesn't look like it's massively helped because I still haven't got that. This isn't a parallelogram, so I can't do anything with opposite sides at all. But what I can do is now look at this triangle and think, well, what can I work out from here? I've got that side, I've got that side, I've got the angle in between. I could work out that side because that would be 3 sides, 1 angle, which is cosine rule. So my next part is to think about the cosine rule and finding a side, and so I can then find this particular side there. So I'm going to set that up using the normal cosine rule because I'm looking for a side. So I'm looking for y squared equals 10.5 squared. And again, I would be using the answer button here rather than just typing that number in. Okay, so I type that in, and I would get y squared equals 292. Square root that to get you y equals 17.09. Now at that stage, I'm nearly there because I've worked out that to be 17.09. And then the final thing I can do from here is looking at the fact that I've got opposite sides there. I've got a side opposite an angle there and a side opposite an angle there, which means 2 sides, 2 angles, which means I can use the sine rule. So finally, we can get to the sign rule here. So again, I'd be labelling my triangle at this point. I'd be using the answer button rather than that. But we're going to set it up as A over sine A equals B over sine B. And I'll be looking at X over sine 48 equals 17.09 over sine 118. I would be taking this, I'd be multiplying the sine 48 up, so I'd be 17.09 times sine 48 over sine 118. I'd be typing that into my calculator, and I'd be ending up after all that with an answer of 14.4 centimetres. Now, as I said, a very complicated question, and this is the sort of level that we need to get to if you're talking kind of grade 8, somewhere around there. Okay, possibly grade 9, because there's 3 different processes there. You've got to remember 3 different rules, 3 different processes, and be accurate within that. So there's a lot of work to be doing there. Okay, so you might need to rewind this video and watch it a couple of times if it hasn't all quite made sense. All the questions that are coming up in the booklet for this lesson are quite difficult. Okay, so if you get stuck at this point, there's no problem with that. You just got to make sure you email your teacher, because these are quite hard, these questions, okay? So, as I say, have a go at the questions, mark your answers, make sure you ask questions of your teachers if you get stuck, okay? All right, thanks very much. Bye.